We've had time to process the end of the Infinity Saga and a world without Iron Man and Captain America, and now it's time to look to the future and what Phase 4 holds. Well, except our first entry will actually happen before Phase 4 when Black Widow gets her posthumous solo movie. What's next, we'll have to wait for what was. It turns out that Natasha might not be the only one to look in the rear-view mirror for her post-Infinity Saga outing. There's a fan theory that Doctor Strange's upcoming Multiverse of Madness might actually take place before the final events of Avengers Endgame. And that will have massive implications for the shape of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Time is a tricky subject. Even when you travel through time the normal way, 1 minute at a time, things can get pretty tricky. Like, when does Spider-Man Homecoming take place again? And that's all before Scott Lang went quantum and discovered that time also moves in other ways. Then Tony Stark did something with the Mobius strip, taught his daughter a word that her mom invented, and in no time the Avengers are moving through time. And that's when things get even trickier. Now there's the whole issue of causality and if what you do in the past changes the future. Well, according to the Marvel Cinematic Universe, no. Once you go to the past, your past becomes your present and you can't change your past. But clearly going into the past has effects, like your elaborate plan to steal the Tesseract can go awry because the Savage Hulk doesn't like stairs. And that can end with Loki grabbing that Tesseract and just blinking on out of there. We know that Loki didn't just blink out. We saw it for the first time when he was captured and went back to Asgard as a prisoner with Thor. So what happens when something happens that totally didn't happen? Timelines. Everybody gets a new timeline. And after the Avengers went adventuring in time, there were a whole lot of new timelines. Over on Disney Plus, we'll see a brandy new timeline with a space skip in Loki and the Tesseract. That's just one new timeline. There's a whole 2014 that no longer has a Thanos, so that means that the Guardians of the Galaxy might never have emerged without Gamora getting between Rocket, Groot, and Quill. In fact, the timeline that Tony Stark didn't want happens, because in that world Thanos never attacks Earth, meaning that the world that created Morgan is in jeopardy. There's a fan theory by Redditor Gunnar Sawas that suggests that Endgame created no less than 5 different timelines, and the creation of those timelines created havoc for the multiverse. Some might say it created madness in the multiverse. A madness that one Doctor Strange had to deal with before getting the gang back together to bring the final fight to Thanos. According to the fan theory, Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness is actually a twisted kind of prequel where Doctor Strange shores up those loose realities before he's able to gather everyone for the final fight. Crazy, right? Why, you ask, does Doctor Strange need to fix up these newly created timelines? I assume that's what you were asking. If you were asking who the text is for when we see things from the Terminator's perspective, I don't know. Not all time travel stories make a lot of sense. There is an answer to the other question, though. During Infinity War, Doctor Strange read ahead in the book to find out which option turned out the best. Out of all the millions of options he saw, only one of them turns out to be the one where the Avengers won, and it needed to involve Tony Stark. He had to be there at the big end. In order to make sure that happened, not only did Doctor Strange not reveal any spoilers to Stark and the rest of us, but he also has to make sure that none of the other new realities created by the time travel shenanigans of the Avengers interfere with fate, collapsing in on the main reality, the one where Thanos loses in 2 realities after winning in 1. Time really gets confusing. So, timelines. Timelines are just universes, functionally. While there is the dark universe where Dormammu hangs out getting disciples and having to bargain with Doctor Strange or be stuck in a time loop, there's the quantum realm itself, which is a doorway to other universes, and then the new realities created by time skipping. But why does Doctor Strange need to do anything about those new realities? Well, if Doctor Strange is able to manipulate the junction between universes and even travel between them, then it's possible that the barrier between these realities isn't exactly rock solid. There's plenty of reasons to believe this is true. The best one is a disagreement between the writers of Endgame and the directors of Endgame, and the most earned dance in blockbuster history. When Captain America goes hurtling back through time to set as much of the timelines back on track as he can, he skips out on his last appointment and heads down to 1945 and gets that dance with Peggy Carter. You know, the one that he missed out on by diving the plane into the sea. According to the writers, Steve Rogers always came back and always was the man in Peggy's life, and the two kept it quiet because of spoilers. According to the Russos, Cap created a new reality where he went back with Peggy and slipped into our reality when the time came to explain his retirement to Sam Wilson. If realities can be porous, then those realities can affect each other in ways that might screw up that one specific way that the Avengers win and Thanos is defeated. This could mean that something like a rogue vision from a reality where things didn't end the same way could throw things into chaos. Maybe since it's from a reality where Hydra thinks that Cap is also Hydra, ends with Ultron actually activating Vision himself, and instead of having the ultimate team-up of all the MCU heroes against Thanos, there's a team-up with Ultron and Thanos against all the MCU heroes. After all, Ultron and Thanos both had a kill a bunch of people indiscriminately kind of agenda. Let's take a look at the new realities. Let's call our reality the Infinity Saga, Reality 1. That's the one that happened the way we saw it. Then there's the reality where Loki takes off with the Tesseract. This is actually a more complicated one than just missing Loki and the Tesseract. Without the Tesseract, the Bifrost isn't rebuilt. Depending on what Loki gets up to, Odin is never exiled, and Ragnarok is put on hold, and perhaps Thanos never makes his way to Asgard in the first place. Also, Thor is now stranded on Earth, and thus spends time as an Earthbound hero. Whew, deep breaths. That's just Asgard. Back on Earth, an alternate timeline, Captain America just told the Hydra double agents in S.H.I.E.L.D. that he was a Hydra agent. Presumably a few moments later, an alternate Captain America showed up and gave those agents Loki's scepter back. Because time travel is confusing. Speaking of Captain America, there's the one who got in a fight with a different timeline version of himself. Presuming Loki's scepter is user-friendly, future Cap was able to erase past Cap's memory, so finding out that Bucky is alive will still be a surprise. Of course, so will a bunch of Hydra agents treating him like he's one of them will be a surprise as well. There's the possibility that these timelines can corrupt the timeline needed for the endgame finale happening the way it's supposed to. There are other dangers though. With all these new timelines being created, the barrier between the other dimensions could be weakened. There are a lot of Doctor Strange stories where he's stopping someone from another dimension from breaking into ours to take it over. It's all Dormammu thinks about most times, even though he keeps having to promise to stop. We know that one of Doctor Strange's oldest foes will be in Multiverse of Madness, and that is Nightmare. Like Dormammu, Nightmare has a thing for taking over our dimension. Unlike Dormammu, Nightmare has an open window into our dimension when we go to sleep having eaten too much cold pizza. Nightmare is, literally nightmares. That's his realm. It's even possible that Nightmare sees that there is nothing that is bigger nightmare fuel than a ridged-chinned grimace snapping out half of existence, and the best way to ensure that kind of power influx, he would have to preserve the nightmare reality. And it's Doctor Strange's job to stomp that down. So how does this gel with what we know? This is where things get a little tricky. First thing we know is that there wasn't a lot of time between the re-snapping and Doctor Strange and the Sorcerers showing up for the final fight. Definitely not a feature-length film's worth of time. The other thing we know is that WandaVision will lead straight up to Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. So, how does this all fit in the time it takes for Thor, Iron Man, and Captain America to fight Thanos? Well, time and timelines are tricky. It's increasingly likely that WandaVision and the second Doctor Strange movie are setting up House of M, a seemingly ideal storyline to bring the new properties like mutants into the MCU. WandaVision in this theory would be the story of different Wandas and Visions coming together and apart as the Wandas start to realize their reality-bending power. It might be why the Wanda that almost destroyed Thanos in Endgame went straight to crushing Thanos. It might also be why Wanda's so sure that Vision knows they won, because she's already been in contact with him. And Doctor Strange and Wanda just had a time-skipping, side-slipping adventure to make sure that all the realities are lined back up so that Tony can make that one final snap and end the Infinity Saga. Then there's the reality where Thanos disappears in 2014, which has wide-ranging implications, including that Captain Marvel doesn't have a reason to return to Earth, or the Guardians for that matter. If the Guardians don't come together, then does Ego not find out there's a kid from Earth who can barehand an Infinity Stone? How likely is all of this? Well, honestly, it's a bit of a stretch. First of all, it requires a lot of actors making a return after their already long-gone contracts have already come up. While Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness starts filming in May, once outgoing director Scott Derrickson is replaced, The Eternals and Shang-Chi both come out before the Doctor Strange sequel, as well as the Disney Plus series. This means that Phase 4 would be in full swing. In Infinity Saga terms, it would be halfway to an Avengers movie. It doesn't seem likely that they'd go back and revisit the Time Heist finale to the Infinity Saga just as they start to get their new story underway. But then again, with Disney magic, anything's possible. That's how Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness might end up being a prequel of sorts. What do you think? Is it likely? What do you think the ramifications of the multiple timelines will be? Let us know in the comments, and while you're there, make sure and hit that subscribe button and to ring that notification bell.